Dr. Laura Markham trained as a clinical psychologist, earning her PhD from Columbia University. But she's also a mom, so she translates proven science into the practical solutions you need for the family life you want. Dr. Laura is the author of the book Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, How to Stop Yelling and Start Connecting, and her newest book, Peaceful Parent, Happy Siblings, How to Stop the Fighting and Raise Friends for Life. The founding editor of ahaparenting.com, Dr. Laura also serves as a parenting expert for mothering.com, Psychology Today, The Natural Parent Magazine, pregnancy.org, Girly Girl Army, sheknows.com, and several other websites. She makes frequent TV and radio appearances and has been interviewed for hundreds of articles by publications as diverse as the Wall Street Journal, Real Simple, Newsday, Men's Health, Redbook, and Parents Magazine. Dr. Laura's relationship-based parenting model has helped thousands of families across the U.S. and Canada find compassionate, common-sense solutions to everything from separation anxiety and sleep problems to SaaS talk and cell phones. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and two terrific kids who are now 18 and 22. Hi, Prana Boosters. Today's featured guest Prana Booster is Dr. Laura Markham of ahaparenting.com. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Tina.
Thank you so much for being on Prana Boost Radio today. We're so grateful to have you here with us and to share space with us to connect.
I am so glad to be here.
You know, over the years, I've really enjoyed your books and your website, and I get your newsletters, and it's really helped me many of the times. I have two daughters who are 9 and 11, and sometimes you just get the perfect message that you need at that moment somehow, right?
I hear this all the time. Yes, I hear all the time from parents, how did you read my mind? How did you know what was going on at our house? I think the thing is that it's universal. The things parents struggle with are universal. So, you know, on a given day, I'm moved to send out a message, and who knows why I'm moved to send that message out, but it's more than one person who needs it, that's for sure, that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think timing is everything. So when we can read something that, you know, like everything that you write about opens us up to new possibilities of, you know, what we can shift or what we can work on or what might help us, or just hear a message that, you know, reaches us in that moment that can help our families live in a more healthy, connected way. So anyway, I would love to hear a little bit more about your parenting journey. So I know that you have kids, but they're grown. Is that right?
That's right. I have a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old.
Ah. So tell me a little bit about how you came to this parenting journey. Did you learn it as you were raising your kids, or after?
I've been very interested in psychology, and especially in children. So when I got my PhD in clinical psychology, my focus was on children and families, and I did my internship in a setting where I work with children and families, and whenever possible in my training, I work with children. So that was, of course, before my own children were born. So I always had that interest. And then when my son was born 23 years ago, I realized that parents really don't have a lot of support, and parents need support. And also, I had read so many research studies by then, and I understood something about child development, and the things that I was told casually by friends, acquaintances, people on buses, my mother-in-law, everybody who gave me advice, you know, I realized they're really not very well informed. In fact, I know much more than they do just from reading these studies and understanding child development, and most people actually don't have access to that information. And you shouldn't have to get a PhD in psychology to raise a child, but it's actually really helpful.
Right.
So I began to realize that, you know, parents need all the support they can get. They're doing the hardest job in the world, and they need support to understand their child. And also, as I began to then work with parents, I began to realize that parents also need support to regulate their own emotions, because no matter what advice I might give a parent about what's in the child's best interest, the parent can't always do that. You know, we look at it and we think, oh my goodness, I know I could have done a better job with that situation, but what could I have done? I was so upset, right? And so parents really need support for their own emotional journey and their own emotional healing, if they're going to be able to use what we know about what children need to give their children a good life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the hardest thing is that when you're so new at it, when you first have these, your first child, or you are so rocky in your own, emotional state, physically, emotionally, everything, but it's so huge. But I think sometimes people don't think it's huge because they think, well, everyone does it. And, a lot of times other generations.
In the beginning, it can be rocky for parents getting started parenting, of course, when you suddenly are handed a new baby. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard. And I think it's hard for parents to also, it would be presumptuous to kind of decide sometimes what type of parent you would be before you meet your child. Because it's so different once you meet your child. They might not be like any child you've read about. They might have similarities, but they also have their unique style and emotions. So, we're learning in the beginning how to trust ourselves to make these types of, like, I call them pop quiz decisions. Like right there in the moment, you have to be ready to make a decision. And, for me, in my experience, my extended family didn't really understand what I was doing. And for me, I had a core foundation that no matter what, my biggest focus was nonviolence. It was going to be nonviolent parenting. So peaceful parenting, gentle parenting, something where we work together, something like that. So I at least could come back to that foundation every time. And I would be like, ooh, that didn't feel good. That didn't go so well. So I had that sort of awareness. But I know a lot of parents, they take childbirth classes and they make us learn how to do our car seats, which are not easy. You kind of need a PhD for installing a car seat nowadays, or folding a stroller. But they don't really teach you anything about emotions that might come up for you or for your child.
It's so striking to me that we focus so much on childbirth. And then at the end of the childbirth, you're holding a baby. And we have basically given parents zero or, minimal support for what to do when they bring home that baby or start life with the baby. So I'm with you completely. It would be an amazing transformation in our society if we could give new parents and people who are about to be parents more support about how the emotional aspects of parenting.
Yes, absolutely. And I had a lot of family members who wanted to give me advice, and obviously they thought that they knew what they were doing. And the people at that time when I really needed the support that I wasn't open to hearing support from were ones who weren't parents. So I had a relative who I said, you're not a parent and you'll never be a mom, and there's just no way you can understand what I'm experiencing. I appreciate you caring, but there's just no way that I can have that conversation, to benefit. So I think we have to seek out people that we feel safe with and comfortable with to be vulnerable. And, it's not something simple. It's a really big deal, and you're raising a human being. So it's a big responsibility. So I love all the effort that you put into help us and provide us with those resources to raise our emotional intelligence about it. So thank you for that. So,
it is my honor. Oh. It is my great honor to do that for parents.
Thank you so much. So I would like to know, though, it is more challenging, even if you have a PhD and everything like that, when you are doing it with your own kids, right? It's different than when you're doing it with other kids, because things come up for you. And
sure, your own issues get triggered. Sure.
Yes, absolutely. Because I know, when my kids were young, I was trying really hard to follow my intuition and follow my heart and do what was good for us. But I was so, what's the word? I was so inexperienced.
When you get triggered when it's your own kid, tell me more. I'm sorry, I sort of lost your question. Maybe you started over.
Oh, okay. So when I coach parents and work with people, I don't do it in like you. I don't have a PhD in it, but I've been, studying many things for the last 20 years. And it's so much easier to solve everyone else's issue when you don't have those emotions. You can see it more clearly. And I notice, I'm often harder on myself as well because I study this information. And so I think that I should be doing it differently or getting it right. I'm harder on myself. But the truth is that we do get triggered. And then you have to remember in that moment that you're triggered, everything that you learn and everything you're supposed to do. And it's so different. So I was wondering how that went for you with your kids. So a lot of the things that you learned, did you use it in the home? Because I do. I mean, we're always using all of it.
So I joke that if I had only had one child, I would have thought I was a perfect mother, because my son was very easy. And he's strong-willed also, but he's not as strong-willed as my daughter, and he's more persistent. There's various kinds of spirited kids, right? My daughter is big emotion. My son is much more reasonable, and although he's stubborn and persistent when he is, thinks he wants something, he's also very willing to see someone else's side, and he doesn't get so swept away by his emotions. So he was pretty easy for me to parent. And then I have my daughter, who is, had these big emotions. And people would say things to me when she was about 3, like, "Ooh, she's a spicy one." Or they would say, I had people say to me, "I pity you when she's a teenager."
Oh.
So clearly, she was seen as being very difficult. And both of my kids were also incredibly active. So people would say things to me like, "Are they always this way?" In terms of how active they were. So my kids were not, or at least neither one was exactly easy, but she especially was a challenge for me. And I think that was really great for me, because I actually learned what it was like to have a child who was really wanted to do what she wanted to do. And if she felt controlled one bit, she would rebel against that. And, what I had to do was to just notice every single time I started to, you said your commitment was to nonviolence. Well, I think part of the commitment to nonviolence, to peaceful parenting, is to notice our own emotions.
Yes.
And to notice every time we start to slip off the edge and get anxious. We do, we get anxious, we get triggered, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And when we do that, when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, all of a sudden the other person is not a real person to us on some level. They're someone, we need to control them, because they're the emergency. There's an emergency, they're causing it, we need to control that person. Right. So it was a great training for me to be her mother, because I began to learn, when I get anxious, when I get upset, and I start to crack down in any way where I start to try to control her, it gets worse, not better. So it was such a great training ground for me by the time she was 18 months old, to realize that this wouldn't work with this child. Yeah. She needed me to understand. But I will tell you also something else that happened, which was also a great training for me. I worked full-time from the time she was about 6 months old. I worked full-time until she was about 3.5, at which point, when I say full-time, I had a company with over 100 employees, and I was having to fly around and manage it. Wow. So I did have a nanny. Yes, so it was a big job.
Yeah.
So I did have a nanny. I was able to take the nanny with me, my daughter. I left my son home with my husband, because he was by then a little older and he was in preschool. And I would take her and the nanny with me when I would travel, and I would send them out to have fun during the day, and I would do business meetings, and then I would come back to the hotel, have dinner with her, put her to bed, and then often I would leave and have another meeting, right? So I was trying to be a good mom to her, but I was also very busy as a professional in my professional life. So at this point, my company was sold, and I was suddenly out of a job. Happily so, but I was out of a job. So what was striking to me was that within 1 month of we stayed connected to our nanny, but she moved out and into her own space. And so within 1 month of my being full-time with my daughter, I suddenly realized something. I had just announced to her that we were going to the grocery store. In the past, when I would have announced something like that, she would have had a full-blown upset because she was busy doing something and she didn't want to go to the store. This time, I did use all the tricks that you hear me use about giving choices
Right.
and warning, all this stuff, and she still would have had a meltdown, right? In this case, I did my tricks, whatever, warnings and choices, and she said, okay, we'll go to the store and I will help pick out the peaches. And it was like this big shift, and I thought, oh my goodness, she is so cooperative all of a sudden. And then I realized, oh, it's because I'm there with her in a whole new way.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that moms or dads can't work outside the home and be connected to their kids. But I was in a very demanding job, and I really was not there emotionally in the same way. And what was amazing was that 5 weeks later, she felt my presence in a different way and wanted to cooperate with me in a different way. So I learned, I was an attachment theorist. I had been trained way before this, and had a PhD, and I, in fact, had done research in attachment. But I learned viscerally that the connection, it's not just attachment for babies. The connection we maintain with our child is the foundation of our child wanting to cooperate with us.
Yes.
And so everything that I teach, I learned, not just theoretically, but by living with my kids.
That's so beautiful. I know. And sometimes things happen that way. And I think that they are our greatest teachers. And they can teach us. And if we're willing to listen also, they will tell us what they need and what they like and what they prefer and what they don't like. And they are really good communicators if we play our role properly, I think. And I think that, I just love that. So she knew, because she felt, energetically, she felt that you were in a different space. And, in your first book, when you talk about, on page 6 in your first book, I love how you say your first responsibility in parenting is being mindful of your own inner state. And I have a favorite quote. It's actually, everyone in my family knows it, and I always say it, and it's on my laptop when I open it. But it says, it's by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, and it's, please be responsible for the energy you bring into this space. And I know, just like what you were talking about, I know when I come to them with a fearful thought or any type of controlling thought, or, usually it's fear-based, no matter what it is. So it's like, oh my God, you realize they didn't eat, they didn't pee, they did like something, right? They're going to be late. If we come in some sort of panic or fear, oh my God, they're like, they put their guards up and they're like, whoa, you're, no way am I going to cooperate with that. That doesn't feel good. So I know they have like these little radars and antennas, right? They can sense us. So your daughter knew that you came with a different inner state.
Yeah. And I think what you just said is so important, because this is the foundation of everything with our children. And parents say to me, I try to be positive. I try to, not yell at my kids. And, yet they don't cooperate with me. And I say, okay, so let's talk about an interaction you just had. And sure enough, in the interaction, they went into it not in a centered place.
Right.
And I think, I'm not blaming the parent. I think most people in our culture, we grow up, and unless we have a practice, means, I meditate daily. I've done yoga for years. I don't think you have to do those things to be a parent and stay centered, but everybody needs some sort of a practice where we bring ourselves back and we begin to notice where we are, because if otherwise we're just unconscious. And You're right, we get triggered, we bring our fear into the interaction, and everything sort of deteriorates from there. When we go into the interaction and we're able to stay calm, then everything unfolds differently.
Right. And I know I want to be really mindful of that too. I try all the time to be mindful, because we as parents, we tend to, we blame ourselves, but then some parents blame each other. So to go into it and say, is it whose fault it is? You and I both agree, we don't do that with the children. It's not about fault. It's not about blame. It's about making a deliberate decision in your head that this is the way that you're going to show up. And if you don't, you offer yourself as much compassion as you would your child who didn't in that, show up that way as well. But you have to be able to accept responsibility in some way for what you're bringing to the problem that somebody would come to you about, right?
Yes.
And I think
yes.
the best part about that for me was, first I did blame myself, and I took a lot of stuff personally, and I took their emotions personally. But then I realized that it made me feel so much more powerful, because I thought, well, if I'm kind of responsible, then there's actually something I can do about it. So
yes, it empowers you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's different. So it's really not about blame. It's about helping just people learn that they can partake in this, that their role is very important and vital to the success of their family. And I love how you show that. I so many things resonate, and it's interesting because I didn't have your stuff when my kids were little. I didn't know about it, and I wasn't aware of it, and I was kind of just doing it from my heart. And that's why I didn't have confidence, because I didn't really have the backup where I could say, well, this doctor and this researcher says this, and this, because people like their research. And when you can use statistics, right, especially like your family, of why you're doing something. But I think what's really great about our generation now is I think that some people are more open to taking responsibility. Do you find that parents are more into self-awareness and realizing that they actually are a part of the huge shift that needs to be made in the family?
Yeah, I mean, when you ask, are parents more likely? I don't know what they were like before, but in the parents that I see today are deeply committed to being the best parents they can be, and it does take stepping up and being responsible for your own inner work. And what happens is parents start the journey maybe thinking they just want to be a good parent to their kid and do what their child needs, but sooner or later they realize they have to work on themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's always who we are. When, what we bring to something, our ability to take responsibility for the energy we're bringing to the interaction, as you said so beautifully, it all depends on our willingness to grow. And so I think, we might not have been willing to do that. That's really hard work. We might not have been willing to do that tough work ourselves, but we love our children so much that we'll do anything for them. And so what better motivation to grow and change than our love for our children?
Yeah. And see, I was really blessed because I had 10 years with my husband before we had kids. So we had worked really hard on building a foundation, and I knew that same amount of, for me personally, I knew that same amount of effort would go into my parent-child relationship. I just didn't know what that would look like. But it was a decision. And so I know there's so many parents, I would love for them to hear, you and I both saying that, when they say, I just can't stop yelling and I just can't stop doing that, we make decisions all the time, right? We make a decision if we're going to drive our car. We make a decision if we're going to, when we get married, right? Like some people say like, yeah, but I can't do it all the time and I can't commit to the decision. And I said, well, on your wedding day, did you say, sure, I'll marry you, but maybe I'll date like once a month or something? I don't know. Like just, I don't know if I can handle myself. Like it's just, it is part of a major switch and a decision in your brain to show up in that way, right?
That's a great point. It is a decision we make.
Yeah.
So what I say is, people will say to me, well, how do you be a peaceful parent? Nobody can be peaceful all the time. And I agree. No one all the time. No one is.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not necessary to be at peace all the time. What is necessary is to make the commitment. You just said make the decision. Mm-hmm. To make the commitment that you will notice what's going on with you. That you'll bring your awareness, your consciousness into the moment with you. And if you start to get hijacked, because we all do, we all have issues from childhood that we get hijacked. Yeah. That's okay. Your job is to notice when you get hijacked and to take, as you said, responsibility, to be self-disciplined about it and say, you know what, I'm really livid at the moment. I feel like I just have to set my kids straight. That's a signal. Mm-hmm. It means don't talk to your kid at this moment. Go calm down first, right?
Yes.
People think they have to talk to their kid right now, but that's the anger talking. That's being triggered. You're in fight, flight, or freeze, and they look like the enemy. So you think you have to go, but you know what? Go calm down first, and your teaching will be so much more effective, right, than if you're going in like this. And, you know where your child lives. They're not going anywhere, so you can wait on this. And so I guess bottom line, what I would like parents to know is it gets easier. You're rewiring your brain.
Right.
You're actually building, I call it mental muscle, but the truth is you're building neural matter. You can't create more neurons, but you can create more connective tissue. So what's happening is every time you're able to stop yourself from lashing out at your child, when you wanted to yell, but you don't, you turn away, you take a breath, you shake out your hands, you go splash water in your face, whatever you have to do to calm down. Every time you do it, you're actually building the neural connections that are allowing you to self-regulate. And it gets easier because the more you do it, the more you reinforce those connections.
Right.
And so 6 months later, you can't remember the last time you yelled.
That's beautiful. I love that. That is so cool. I know it, and it does take practice. It does take practice to build that muscle. Especially, I notice what's really interesting is that I think what's hard for parents, would you agree? It's hard for them to give what they have never received. So, we were raised so differently, right? Like past generations, they were not attentive to the child's needs, and they were attentive. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. They were not attentive to the emotional needs of the child as much as the physical needs. And so I think when you have never received it, it's hard to recognize it and actually give it to somebody when you're like, well, I don't even know how to do that. So it is a relearning and a reprocessing, and to build that neural matter is so important, I think, to know that it's possible that you can do it, because I think most people don't even recognize that type of compassion or empathy, or they'll say, nobody cared when I cried when I was little, so they don't know how to give that.
Well, we're a little frozen here, so I'll wait a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe we're... Okay, now we're coming back. All right. So we can cut that little bit out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I agree with you that most people don't know how, if somebody didn't empathize with them, it's very hard for them to even know what empathy is and how to give it to their child. I think of it as emotional generosity. Someone on my Facebook page said the other day, when you talk about how you will be patient, how we can be patient with a child and help them with their emotions and all that, it sounds a lot like coddling. And I thought, if you never got it, then you think it's coddling, which means unnecessary giving something to the child. But I think of it as emotional generosity. I think of it as, sure, I would like to get what I want here, but actually what this other person needs at this moment is some emotional generosity from me, because they're a child and they're still learning. And if I can do this, they can actually grow and learn, and they can become somebody who has emotional generosity themselves.
Yeah.
That's to create a world of more emotionally generous people, right? But it has to start somewhere. And if we didn't get it, in a way, we're creating love from nothing, right? Mm-hmm. We're transforming something that was maybe not so much love inside us into love. You're creating love where there wasn't any. And to me, that's the purpose of life, to take the places where there isn't love and to create more love, right? And it is absolutely what our children need from us. But in the course of that, we're doing something not just for the world, but for ourselves, mm-hmm. which is transformative.
Yes, I love that. That's beautiful, Laura. That's amazing. When you said that, it makes me think of, everybody says, I don't like to use the word everybody, sorry. Some people say, or somebody who would have written coddling, or some people who say these contradictory things about peaceful parenting or things like that, or discipline. It's interesting. What I like to reflect back to them is I like to say sometimes, that is a belief. And people often say a belief is a thought you just keep thinking. That's all it is. So if you have had the capability to learn that, you have the capability to learn this way too, and then see which one feels better to you. Because it's all just learning new behaviors, right? It's new patterns, new expectations. And I think the more of us that are open to it will be holding hands of everybody who who wants to come that way, and maybe they're just a little afraid, or maybe they have family that's holding them back and telling them that it's not good for them, or they're going to ruin their kids, or whatever else we've heard, right? But we can just help each other through it and just find a way that works, that feels better.
I think we have to help each other through
Yeah.
it. I think it is the hardest thing because we're talking about not just parenting, but transforming ourselves.
Right.
And it is very, very hard, emotional work, but the rewards are huge. And yes, you're right that we can. I mean, I just see us all holding hands and sort of advancing into the future, all of us, and really transforming the human race.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I'd like to talk about the big P word, I call it punishments.
Okay.
It's interesting, but I have often said, if I say to anybody that I have a 9 and 11-year-old who have never been punished, it doesn't even register, because they're like, they don't even know what that means, and they're just like, I don't get it. Like, just, it's like I'm speaking another language, right? But literally, I have raised 2 daughters that have never been punished, and I'm very proud of it because that was my intention. And it's by no means that it's been easy or perfect, or we haven't had emotions or trauma or, flaring, events. But it's the fact that I was committed to not punishing my children for their emotions, which I believe is most of the time why kids get punished. It's not always action. It's a lot of times it's emotion, right? How they speak, how they act, right? So I love that you say that it's possible, not to punish your children. And on page 33 of your first book, you talk about discipline, despite all of the books written on it, doesn't work. Punishment always worsens your child's behavior. I agree completely with this. It breaks your connection and your trust that you have between you and your child. I mean, how can they come to you if you're the person who's, playing the role of punisher at times? So I think parents have a lot, really hard time understanding that, because it goes against everything we were raised with, or we know, or we were taught. So maybe you can just expand upon that a little bit.
My children were never punished either. And I think parents they punish for a number of reasons. One is they're worried about how the kids will turn out. And when they don't punish, they're afraid that will mean their kids won't come out well. All I can say is the children I see who weren't punished, they're so emotionally intelligent. They're so self-disciplined. They're so responsible. They're amazing. Not just mine, but other people's kids who weren't punished also. So it's not that big a universe yet of kids, but the numbers are growing. There are, and it's also a continuum. So there are kids who, are punished more severely, and then there are kids who aren't punished at all. And definitely there are still some on either end of the spectrum, but we're moving in this direction where there's less and less, punishment, and it's becoming more minor punishments or even no punishment. So I would say, beyond worrying about how your kids, and by the way, the research supports this, that kids will turn out better with no punishment. So that's one thing.
Awesome.
Also, they punish because they don't know what else to do. They get frustrated in the moment. They try to be nice. They say, be nice, They try to speak nicely to their child. They're at the end of their rope. Their kid is not paying attention to them. And they don't know what else to do at this point.
Right.
There's a reason for the kid not cooperating at this moment. Maybe the parent and the child are not connected. We think we're always connected to our kids, just like I did when my daughter was a baby and a toddler, really, when she was so difficult. We think we're always connected because we adore them. We do anything for them. I was dragging her around all over the United States on airplanes. But you know what? She didn't feel connected the way she did after that, when I began to show up differently with her, both in the amount of time I spent and also in my calmness and focus, right? And presence, full
Right.
presence. So when we're connected, children are much more likely to cooperate. And parents will sometimes write me and say, I read your book and I started doing what you say in the book. I stopped punishing. but now my kid just doesn't listen to me. And I say, well, have you started doing connection with your child? Well, of course we're connected. Well, but actually, do you spend special time with your child every day? Do you empathize with them no matter what they say? There's some best practices around connection. Do you roughhouse with them every day? Then those kinds of connection practices help your child to want to cooperate. And when you do those things, you don't actually end up feeling like you'd want to punish your child because the child's not doing anything to require it, generally.
Right.
But there may still be times when the child will become emotional and have a hard time. That happens with every child, as you said, just normal life. And so then parents say, well, then I have to punish, right? Well, I would say, no, then you have to recognize that your child's having a hard time. There's some big emotions going on. Your child is acting out. You know what acting out means? Acting out emotions they can't put into words. So I like, there's an example. Mom, Dad, ever since you had the new baby, things have been pretty bad around here. You guys are so grouchy. You're tired all the time and you won't play with me. Nobody even seems to care what I want anymore. You don't even love me anymore. No, your child doesn't say that. You know what they do? They hit the baby, or they throw themselves down on the floor and howl, or they just say, no, you can't make me, So if we could help the child with the emotions, they wouldn't need to act out, right? So again, would punishment be the right answer when there's big emotions, as you said? When kids are having a hard time emotionally, they need help with their emotions. So I can't think of a time when it actually is the right answer, ever. There would never be a time when violence is okay. And punishment is violence.
Right.
If you look up punishment in the dictionary, here's what you'll see. Punishment is causing another person pain for one of two reasons. Either because you want them to do things your way, or because you want revenge. And the truth is, both of those things come into play for parents sometimes. Because parents are just so fed up that they actually do want revenge in a small way on their child.
Right.
But they want their child to do what they want. So that's why we punish. And it's causing pain. It's purposefully causing pain to our child. And children know that. They know you're purposefully causing them pain. So why should they trust you after that? Why should they want to do what you want? That's why punishment always causes worse behavior. Right. Because the child feels more disconnected after.
Right. Right, and they're feeling terrible. And they were feeling terrible to start with. Now they feel even worse. And there's no recovery process so it's not to say, I think parents who maybe have punished, I think it would be wonderful for them to know that they can shift it and they can reverse it and rebuild and reconnect. And when we say we don't punish our children, sometimes I say I think I have punished mine by talking too much or talking things through too much or, things like that, just as a little joke, because it was just so important to me not, to continue that bond. So I have notes on my iPhone when they were asleep, I would say dear Isabella, mommy's so sorry, gosh. Sometimes I say that other people do it and I was doing it. I can't believe it. And thank you so much for letting me know. As they get older, they would let me know. I had little kids because I was studying consciousness. I had little kids saying, Mommy, you're not being conscious. And I was like, oh, God, you're right. I'm not. But it was wonderful. And they used to think they were catching me in the act or something. But I said, no, I love it. You have to help me just like I help you. You have to help me raise my awareness when I don't catch myself. And things like that. So we had really crazy conversations since they were young, actually. And I wanted to talk about that. I was going to tell you that I've one of the things that is so important to me, actually, was and how you talk about validating children's feelings. Everywhere I go, you hear parents that say, oh, you're not hungry, you just ate, or you're not cold. And they're like, maybe I'm not cold. I thought it was cold. Isn't this what cold feels like? And it's so insane to me because these same parents who want their children to listen are just really not doing much, hearing and listening of what their children say and what they need. But for us, it kind of backfired for us to repeat back what we thought was going on. So for instance, if your child is getting upset and you say, honey, I see that you're really upset, right? And if we try to name that feeling, well, we taught her the word assume when she was 4. So right away, my oldest would say, like, I'm not upset. You're assuming I was upset, but I'm not upset, And so she actually didn't like when we would name her feelings or state her feelings or try to guess what she was feeling. And the reason being behind that was kind of funny. It's because my husband typically was always wrong. He would be like, oh, she's doing that because she's hungry. And she'd be like, no, Daddy, I'm not hungry. I'm actually upset, like PMS, right? Like you're actually, there's a reason. Yes, you might be experiencing something, but you're actually having an emotion as well. So I like that you talk about validating feelings, and I think that that's so important for parents to learn how to validate them, and while you're validating them, not judging them, right? Because us as grown-ups, I think half the time we're in resistance of our children's emotions sometimes because we just don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense. We know about
I think we're frozen, so I'm going to wait to answer that.
Are we back? We're back on the air.
All right. So, I think what you just said is really important for parents because they hear they're supposed to empathize and validate feelings, and so they say, oh, you're so angry or whatever. And when children are little, meaning 2 years old, and you say, you are mad, you're so mad, Mommy said no cookie, and you're mad. And then you say, and you still can't, hit me or throw the cup or whatever the kid just did, right?
Right.
But the kid actually at the age of 2 really benefits from your saying you're so mad because they don't know what mad is. And this helps them bring some more consciousness to it, some more awareness, like, oh, this is what mad feels like.
So you're defining it.
Yes, and they're learning a new word and a new concept, and they're even learning, well, Mom or Dad or whoever is talking to me seems to think being mad is okay. I'm not allowed to throw the cup, but they think being mad is okay, right? So the child is actually learning something of great value that's very validating for them. I'm mad, and it's okay to feel this way, and I'm mad. And they love to tell you, I'm mad. Or the toddler will say, mad, or the 3-year-old will say, mad at you, But there comes a time, usually around 4, where they start to feel analyzed. Yeah. They start, like, if we say, you are very angry at me, but you cannot hit, what they hear is, you are analyzing me and controlling me. You're distancing yourself from me. That's what they actually hear. Because, in fact, that tone of voice was that. I know you're mad at me, but you can't hit, right? It's actually still a controlling thing. It's not a joining thing.
Right.
So what I ask parents to do when they're validating feelings is to join rather than control. It doesn't actually matter what your child is feeling, and you do not have to verbalize what the emotion exactly is. You don't. You won't. Your husband tried his best and wasn't always right, right? That's true for all of us. We're not going to always be right, and we don't have to. We don't even have to put the label out. Because frankly, when I'm really angry, like imagine this. You come home from work and you're really angry, and your partner says to you, you are very mad and sad. It's like, you would want to smack them, right? It doesn't help to feel analyzed.
Right.
If you come home from work and you're really angry about something that happened, and your partner says, wow, no wonder you're upset. I can't believe that. Tell me more. Then you have someone who's joining you and helping you to work through your feelings, right?
Right.
Very different, right? So we don't need the feelings labeled. And even an 8-year-old won't let you get away with labeling the feelings. Right. Like your girls are 11, they're going to be like, Mom, don't analyze me, or shut up, Mom, don't use that voice, or whatever, right? They're going to be really upset if they feel like you're analyzing them, because it's not actually a joining, right? It's a distancing. So instead, what I would say to parents is join. So your child's upset about something, instead of saying you're angry, which your child's going to say, no, I'm not, right? Or, of course I'm angry, you never listen, or whatever. Instead of saying that, you can say, oh, just like your partner did when you came home angry. Like, oh, sweetie, you're so upset. Now, if it's about you, it's harder because you feel attacked, right? If they came home from school, it's easier. Oh, you seem so upset. What happened at school? Oh, my goodness. And if they don't want to talk about it then, they'll talk to you later because they feel like you understood. But if it's about you, then you can say, you are, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this was so important to you. Sounds like you really wish I hadn't done that, or whatever. But you notice I'm engaging in a real interaction.
Right.
I'm putting my emotions there with them. That you can do this even with a 4-year-old, although you're still holding the space as a grown-up.
Right.
No, they still can't do X, Y, Z. But also, you wish I would let you, stay in the bathtub. I know, and it's time to get out of the tub. I hear how much you want to stay in, right? But you're empathizing with what you're seeing it from their point of view, right? Rather than just labeling. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love it. And you're not arguing with their feelings. You're agreeing with them because I wish I wish that someone spoke to me like that, like for real. Like I wish more people spoke to each other like that, like gosh, I know that, traffic was just, really hard today. God, what did you do? Did you listen to something? Or, that must have been crazy. But instead people are like, well, you shouldn't go that route, or maybe you should leave earlier, or right? Like everyone's always, we're in that habit, right? Like it's a habit, and it's a habit, and it's a pattern that we can shift. But, that fixing thing, I think that it's hard to notice that transition, like you said, up until like, maybe 4 years old. Like, so when you have a 2-year-old, that's okay, right? So if you have a 2-year-old hitting, we would say the same things, like, because they see people hit, right? I mean, it's not like my kids watch stuff, but I don't know. They would see it, or they would see other kids hit each other if it was a play date. And I would often talk to them like they were older, but I would say, yes, people sometimes hit when they're angry, but we don't hit in our family. We're not going to do that. We're choosing not to do that in our family. So, because I didn't want them to think they're crazy, like people don't hit. That's not true. People do. But we're choosing not to, just because it doesn't feel good. So, things like that. But I mean, yeah, it's just so wonderful to know that you could even speak to someone like that. I mean, I think people would like to have a spouse who, speaks to people like that. I learned early on that if I came over and tried to, figure out what was going on or analyze it, it always backfired. So I had to come up with my own statement, and I would say, how can I help? Or I'm here if you need, I'm here if you need me. That way they could state what they need, and they could tell me. And obviously that changes as they get older, when they're like, newborns in a diaper, you can still say, like, what do you need? Is it, let me check your diaper, or let me, maybe you're hungry. Gosh, look at the time. You can still speak like that, but there is a transition where later they'll tell you, and then you have to listen. Absolutely. Well, this is wonderful. I want to see what else I was going to talk to you. So I was talking about the other thing about being in resistance, I think is challenging. I went into resistance mode a lot. This would be in reference, let's talk about your second book about siblings, which I think that was a big trigger for me, siblings, because in my own head, when I imagined that these two people, came out of me, out of my physical being, it was very hard, because there's no choice. You're like at, in a Western, where they're facing each other. There's no choice. You can't choose between, two children. You never can. You can't decide who's right and have success, even if somebody did do something or cross the line. And so I love what you write about in your book, and I want to tell you from my own experience. I used to sit there and try and imagine what it would be like to start a clothing line for moms that were like referee stripes, because I felt like a referee, like I had to just be, back and forth and try to figure out how to ease that, conflict that they felt. But that was really challenging for me. So I'm so happy that you wrote your book on siblings. And that's actually what I was talking about when I was saying come to them with how can I help, rather than being the judge and the jury. So tell me a little bit more about that book. It has such beautiful messages in it.
Thank you. I wrote this book because it's the book that I needed when my second child was born, because my son panicked initially and wanted to send her back or flush her down the toilet. And there was no book out there that really taught parents how to help that child with his emotions.
I think I was just going to tell you something funny. You reminded me. I think my dad hid my uncle in like a drawer After they brought, I just heard that story recently, and they couldn't find him for a little bit.
I hope not for too long, but I'm sure he cried sooner or later and they found him, but that's amazing. I love that. Yeah, so exactly. I mean, I don't think there's a child who's been born who had a sibling after them who didn't feel at least some anxiety about that because, scarce resources, parental attention, we need that to survive. And, if somebody else is getting it, means we're not getting it, right? So naturally, children react that way. So I wanted a book that would teach me how to tend to both my children's emotions and foster a great relationship between them. And then as they got a little older, that would teach me how to support them to say what they needed, to stand up for what they needed, but to do that without attacking the other person, right? Skill again, if we're committed to nonviolence, the skill we all need is to not just buckle down and do what someone else wants, but to express our needs and wants and desires and preferences in a way that respects the other person's needs and wants and desires and preferences. So imagine what kind of a world it would be if all of us learned this in childhood, right? So that's why this book was written. It's for all of us to learn to do that. And, I think it is really, really important for us as parents to remember that we don't have to be the referee. We don't ever have to be the referee. All we have to do is say, how can I help? And the way we would say, how can I help, is that we would go into the situation where the kids are yelling at each other or the fists are flying or whatever. You take the shrapnel, you get in between the children so they're not touching each other. And you say, whoa, whoa, whoa. You two are so upset at each other. Tell me about it. So tell me about it, right? Tell me about it. And they both want to tell you at the same time. So you're like, you're taking deep breaths and you have an arm around each one because that way, when you're talking to this one still feels connected to you, right? And you can turn your head back and forth and swivel back and forth and, you're eventually, they're both telling you. And I would hasten to say, they're not telling you so you can decide who's right. That's not the purpose. You don't have to, because when parents think they have to keep track of it, they're like, wait a minute, go back. Had he already hit you by then? No, you don't have to decide that. You don't have to decide who hit who first. All you have to do is listen so they feel heard and then help them tell it to each other. So at some point you say, sounds like you really have something important to tell your sister about this. It sounds like you were pretty upset when she did that. Can you tell your sister? And sometimes they'll be like, no, you tell her. Or sometimes they'll be like, yes, you're a terrible sister. I hate you. I wish I never had a sister. So then you have to coach them about how to do it, right? Because we say use your words. Right. But we don't tell what words.
Right.
The words are, right, we need to give them the words. The words are, you can tell your sister how you feel. Not what you think of her, how you feel and what you need. Tell her how you feel and what you need. I feel mad because I need you not to break my toy or whatever, right? And when they can start doing that, that is the beginning of nonviolent communication.
Right.
Marshall Rosenberg, who invented the concept of nonviolent communication, I don't have his exact way he does it because I've read his book, but I've never actually studied this. But what I advise parents is actually very similar to his, which is just to teach for themselves and also to teach the child to say, this is what I need, right? This is what I need. And I think what Rosenberg says is then you ask the other person if they're willing to do what you need. When you're talking to a child and trying to get I would say, I'm worried because we have to be at the dentist and you don't have your shoes on yet. And so what I need is for you to get your shoes on right now so we can go, right? I wouldn't say, would you be willing to get your shoes on? Which is what Rosenberg would say, right? That's where, for the parent-child relationship, most of the time I part from that, unless it's an option. If it's an option, like I'm exhausted and we just came home with all the groceries in the car and you've been hanging out here with your dad, would you be willing to come downstairs with us to get, to come with us to get the groceries out of the car? Your dad and I are carrying them in. Would you be willing to help us? Maybe you would do that with your 12-year-old. Honestly, I probably wouldn't. I would say when I bring home the groceries, everybody helps bring them in. Like that's the rule. But people can play with that. But I think with siblings, what you're teaching them is, I feel this, because of this, I need that, right? And you're not attributing something. You're not judging the other person. And that's how parents can coach kids. That's what's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important, and they need us. And the biggest problem is usually we, as parents, sometimes we don't, unless, somebody studied it like you or I, you don't learn it in school. You don't learn it anywhere. You don't learn how to manage conflict. And, for me, I was extremely triggered by anger. I wasn't upset. Anger didn't make me angry. Anger made me scared. So that triggered stuff from probably when I was young and how I was raised. But I was afraid of it. So I was afraid of their big emotions sometimes. And, so I had to work through that. So it is recognizing how it's affecting us and why it's affecting us. Because we can really escalate it. We can really add to their trauma of what they're already going through. And I think the other thing is sometimes we feel that life is challenging, maybe they're not watching the news, but we know something that happened that day and this seems very insignificant, but it's significant to them and they're experiencing it, and we don't have the right to judge it. We just have to help them through it. I think they need that. So I think it's so important. So yeah, it's been such a wonderful conversation. There's so many things we can talk about. I was just going to ask you one more thing. Early on, there's something that I did that made me sort of an outcast in my home, in my family, and in with friends and everything like that. And I felt that it was very important for me to allow my kids to say no to me. Something that is like completely unacceptable and not a reasonable response from a child to an adult. Or I just intuitively I felt like if they could trust me and they knew that they could say no, they would know they could say yes. So I didn't really have any research behind it, but I would let them say no. Like somebody would say, are they going to hug me goodbye? And and I would ask them, and I would say, you're allowed to say no. You can say no. And I let them say no. A big one that I gave them and empowered them the ability to say no to photos. So I think photos, we don't even probably want to go down that rabbit hole right now, because that would be another long conversation. We can do that in the future. But I said they have a right to decide if they want to be in a photo or not. And we do a lot of permission-based parenting, and somebody would say, like, oh, come on, let's take a picture. And then they would look at me and say, I don't really want to. And I would say, that's okay, you can say no. And in the beginning, they were like, can you say it for me? You need to say it for me. And that was hard because people didn't trust that it was coming from them. But that's okay. But I did it. I took one for the team for that. But I let them say no, because I think it's important to be able to tell somebody their boundaries and their limits of what feels comfortable. And a no isn't always like forever. Sometimes it's just a no, not right now, or no, they're busy, or maybe they're watching a show, or, and we just kind of come in and say, okay, time for dinner, it's late, nobody ate, or something like that, right? But my kids would say, no, I have 10 more minutes. Can we, can I come after that? Or, it becomes more of a discussion if you give them that ability. So do you have experience with that? Do you believe in letting them say no or speak up to the parents?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And I would say there are things that are non-negotiable to me. So they have to say goodbye to somebody, but they don't have to hug them, because they always are in charge of who touches their body.
Right.
That, parents often ask me to speak about consent. How do we teach our girls that they have the right to consent or withhold consent, and how do we teach our boys that they have to listen for someone's consent before they touch them? And that's a simplification, but that is often how the gender issue breaks down around consent among teachers. So parents ask me about consent. Consent begins with knowing that your body is your own and nobody touches your body without your permission. And even, if you're brushing your daughter's hair and she's saying, ouch, that hurts, most parents say, oh, stop it. You've got to get to school. We're in a hurry. Just, it's okay. Come on. And then they pull harder, In fact, a way to handle that, Larry Cohen, who wrote Playful Parenting, has a game that he recommends, which is, as you're brushing the hair, if the child says, no, ow, you say, okay, tell me when to stop and tell me when to go. And it takes about 1 minute longer to brush the hair in the end, but the child is in control. And they're giving their consent for how you're brushing their hair. And it transforms the entire interaction. And you can also do this for hair washing or anything where your child is afraid physically and you're asking them to cooperate with you, right? But so, yes, maybe they have to wash their hair, although frankly, even that is negotiable to me. Washing the hair, like how important is it, you know?
Right.
Maybe I'll take it to the pool and the hair will get clean. You know, there are other ways to do it, right? Instead of them, you know, feeling like they have to wash it at that moment in the tub, usually.
Right.
But there are some things that are non-negotiable. Maybe at that moment there's peanut butter in the hair and it's not negotiable to me. They have to wash the hair. But I would still give them control and, you know, that
in
they would
way.
be able. Exactly. They would have some way to control it so they don't feel physically assaulted, basically, right? They're giving consent. So, you know, there are some things that are non-negotiable. Bedtime is non-negotiable. But, you know, and someone might say, well, mealtime, you just cook 10 minutes, you know. But I guess I would say if they're doing something that they need 10 more minutes, if I can wait dinner, I might. But I might also say you can come back after dinner. Or what I would mostly do is I would give a warning. You know, dinner's going to be ready in 15 minutes. No, we won't be ready. You know what? Find a way to wrap it up in 15 minutes or whatever. So if parents watching this think, well, I'm not going to let the kid tell me when dinner is. I just worked really hard to get it on the table. It's getting cold. I'm not going to wait to eat, and I want a family dinner. I totally get that, but there's always a way around it. I guess that's what I say about saying no is there's always a way we can work together as partners and find win-win solutions. Right. That's what's important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I just think that some people thought it was just completely, totally unacceptable. But reframing it is what I was referring to, like reframing it, repurposing it, and discussion. You know, in a discussion-based relationship where you work together and you know try to work something out. That's sort of the relationship we have. You know, it's like a balance. It's like a beautiful dance that we do. You know, and try to work it out and try to make sure that everybody feels heard in some way, even if you're not doing what everybody wants. You explain and you know. You just have that line of communication open. So that's where the no comes from, you know, or a no, not right now, or, you know, sometimes a no without even an explanation, you know, I let them do, like, you know.
or I would say a demand for respect. So I'm thinking when my son was 3, we were visiting some friends, and it was very unusual for me to be curt with him. But apparently I was, because what happened, I remember we were on a staircase coming down to the living room where my friend was sitting. And he's a little bit older than I am and from a European background and very proper, right? And he actually didn't have any children yet at this point. Or maybe he did, his daughter was a year old, but she's a couple years younger than my son. So she wasn't old enough to have yet, you know, been difficult. So I remember I must have said something to him that was curt because my son, who was 3, looked at me and said, I don't like it when you talk to me that way. And my friend said to my husband, who was with him on the couch, wow, if he's already saying that when he's 3, what's he going to say when he gets older? And I said, I think he's going to ask that people treat him in a respectful manner, like of which he deserves.
Right.
And I actually apologized to him and said, I'm sorry, Eli. I was impatient because everybody else was waiting for us to go or whatever it was, you know. But I was actually, as you said, your kids call you on stuff. It's a blessing.
Yeah.
I was grateful to him. And I was so glad for this man making this observation because I realized, most people would think it wasn't okay for my son to ask for basic respect.
Right.
But we wouldn't talk to adults that way, right? And we would want our children to grow up to expect to be respected and to choose people who respect them to hang with.
Absolutely. I love that story because you know what? I think everybody always asks, you know, how do we teach them to be respectful? And I was like, simple. Be respectful to them. It's so simple. It's so simple that it's not done. You know, it's really just not, it's not natural. But that is the actual thing. So in that moment, and you must have been doing something right that you gave him the ability to have that, you know, vocabulary that he would even feel safe to tell you how he felt, you know, and even in front of people. So, I mean, that was amazing. And yeah, I think the more we do it, so sometimes I think the other thing is we don't like when these things happen in public, right? Because we see people watching us. But I think if we're on this path, I actually love when people see it because they can see how it's actually handled. It's not just behind closed doors and we'll do it later when no one's looking. They can actually see it in use, out in the world. So I think it's a good thing. So I think times are changing. I think people are more open. I'm so grateful for your time and for your work that you do, and in helping people shift patterns and shift their neuromatter, and and just grow into the parents that the kids today need us to be, because they are different than our parents were when they were kids. They are different. So they do need us to step up. I know. Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And like I said, all that you're doing, because the more we hear about it, the more we get the word out, I think we can just really shift humanity forward to something we've never seen before. So I appreciate you and your time today and your work. And I just want to let everyone know that I'll have links to your books and your website, ahaparenting.com, and all your information up on my site when we go live with this interview. But thank you so much for your time today.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Namaste.
Namaste.